So where can you find data to practice on? That's actually a question I get several times a week. I usually get that question from students who aspire to be a data analyst or people who are looking for a job as an analyst. And the answer is, there are a couple ways to get it. You could go on kaggle.com and download files of raw data, or go onto Reddit and look at the Excel questions posed by RExcel, or you could just make your own. That's right, you can make data to practice on. And that's what I'm going to show you in this video. It's not going to be a video about analyzing the data we make, and I'd actually like to see the answers you come up with on the problem that we create. If there's enough interest, I can do a follow-up, but for now, this video is purely about creating fake data to practice on. In graduate school, when they gave us a data problem to work on, it was usually one of two types, either medical or manufacturing. So I've opted to do a typical sales and manufacturing supply chain-like workbook. Of course, you can come up with different ideas for your own spreadsheet and make it your own. Make it as complex or as simple as you want. So let's start with dates. Let's say we work at a company where we sell something and manufacture once we get the order. Supply chain, we call that make to order. So I'm going to start by hitting Control and semicolon to give us today's date. And below it, I'll type an equal sign, refer to this cell, and then add to it a RAND formula. What RAND does is pick a random decimal number between 0 and 1, and you don't put any arguments in the formula to do this, it's just RAND open and close parentheses. So what happens when we add RAND to our date is that it either adds a whole day, half a day, or a quarter day. But the point is I want to make it sporadic, because sales aren't going to come in every single day like clockwork. They're going to come in maybe 3 a day, 1 a day, and so on. One thing to note is that when you have a formula like RAND, it recalculates whenever you hit F9. It'll continue to recalculate until the very end when you do a copy-paste special value over this data to freeze it. I'll show you that later. So also for this problem, we'll put the week number by the date, and for that we'll do equals week number, week num, in order to aggregate by week. The reason is that we may want to evaluate sales or production weekly and not necessarily daily. Maybe we work for the scheduling department and not on the production floor where they get the signal of what to make weekly. They make the day-to-day schedule based on that. Again, make it your own. It doesn't exactly have to be like this. So it says first is 47th week of the year, and so on. Let's insert a column for item code to represent items that we are quote-unquote selling. This is tricky because we don't want a billion items to analyze. We just want maybe a total of 8 or 9. We're just a small operation here. But I want to create the semblance of being an authentic company, so I'm going to make the number about 3 numbers long. So in order to do that, I'm going to use a RAND array formula. That gives you an array of however long you specify. In this case, I'm making 3-digit randomized numbers. And they're going to be 1 row in depth and 3 columns in length. To give us only 9 or so combinations, I'm only going to pick from the numbers 4 and 5. So the argument for minimum will be 4 in this case, and maximum will be 5. And I want it to be integers, not decimals. So the last argument is true. So that gave us an array. There are fancy ways to get more complicated item numbers, like alphanumeric. I'm going to keep it simple in our sheet and just use numbers. Here's some points on array formulas. When you create one, you get formula in one cell, and the rest are light gray if you look up in the formula bar. That means you can't type anything here or you get a spill error. This would be the first step in creating item numbers, but I'm going to nest this formula with another one. And if anyone out there is groaning about nesting formulas, I want to assure you that it's not that complicated. If you want to advance in Excel, you should be comfortable with nesting formulas. So I'll show you how to nest a formula with concat. Concat is a concatenation formula. It means it's going to take this whole array and cram it into one cell. So if you were to look at the unique combinations here, you'd see about 8 or 9 different item numbers. Like I said, you don't want to get overwhelmed in your example. So how many did we sell? For that, we'll put another column called quantity. And for that, we'll use a rand between formula with a top and bottom value. What that's going to do is return whole numbers, which makes sense because we aren't in the business of selling half an item. So let's say the minimum order is 5 and the maximum number is 500. Go ahead and make these numbers whatever you want, it's fine. So there we have our quantities of what was ordered on what date. I'll add for a moment that the RAND formula applies things at kind of a dice roll where it's evenly probable for each of the outcomes. So it's not like actual sales where you got people of varying success, etc. Of course we can create such a model, but we're going to pretend the company is a place where reps just take orders by phone, business to business style. Maybe they make a part that goes in a product that another company sells to end users. So what I'm getting at is that it's not going to follow a normal distribution. We're not going to go over statistics in this video, but I want to indicate we have randomly assigned sales. I'd still like to put the sales rep in a column. So I'll make the rep numbers between 11 and 20. So 10 total reps. Again, using rand between. Bottom number of 11, top of 20. So next we want to determine how much each of these items cost. And instead of assigning a random price for each row, which wouldn't make sense, we need to leverage another sheet and do a lookup. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and add a customer column. And again, we don't want to go nuts with too many customers, so what we'll do is we'll have between 1 and 15 customer numbers. And then we'll wrap that in a text formula to make it appear a little bit different from the other numbers we have. So some leading zeros there. Call the first sheet here sales. And this sheet we'll call pricing. So on the pricing sheet we'll use a equals unique formula, which is another array formula that refers to any other array but just lists each unique item once. So I'm going to highlight the whole column of item codes. And to get the price, I'm going to do an equal rand and then multiply that by 100. That way we get a random price per item. And to make it look more like dollars and cents, I'm going to wrap that into a round formula. So round and then comma 2 to round it to 2 decimals. Now the reason I've copied it down a little bit further is in case we decide to add more item types. So what I'm going to do is put an if formula here and simply said, give this condition if the item code is 0 or blank, then I want to return a blank. As you can see, the formula is in each of these cells. But once it turns blank, it returns blank. I'm going to do Control-Shift number 4 to format that as dollars. So now we can do a lookup on price. For that we do VLOOKUP. We can also do XLOOKUP, but the legacy user of VLOOKUP. I use VLOOKUP. Sorry, don't judge. For more on V and XLOOKUP, see my obstacle courses on those. I don't plan to put anything else in this sheet, so I'm going to reference the entire columns. And type false for exact match. And there we go. We've populated our prices, which are at random, of course. We'll put another column called sales total. For that, we're going to round to 2 decimal places. So round and then price times quantity, comma 2 for 2 decimal places. Make these both dollars. Control Shift number 4. There we go. We've got our sales records for a make-believe company. Feel free to continue these formulas down however many rows you want. You can go to the last cell in Excel if you want, but that might slow down your sheet. We've got prices and we've got sales, and we can stop there for any simple kind of practice. But if you want to make this problem more complex, let's think of the manufacturing side of things. Make another sheet called demand. That just simply means the total of items we've sold and now need to make. So we want 2 columns here, week number and item number. Then we're going to get the sum by week and item number using sum if, and I'll show you how. So this is a cool trick. Instead of concatenating item and number and then doing unique, you can just make a box around both of the columns. And Excel knows to give us unique item week number combinations. So observe this for a second. I highlight the 2 columns. And here's the result. We have all week and item code combinations displayed only once. Pretty handy. At this point, we want to place the total sales quantity next to each of these combinations. And you'll see a 0 at the end of this list. Because we have empty columns, the Excel formula is considering to be unique, but not a big deal in the end when we copy and paste special values. We'll just eliminate those. So to briefly summarize sum ifs, it's a way to get subtotals based on conditions. So we want totals for this item, this week number, on down the list. The first argument the formula takes is sum range, meaning the numbers we want to total. For that, we highlight the quantity columns. And again, I'm going to highlight the entire column for this, in case we want to add to that. So now it wants our criteria range. And for that, we're going to first put in item. Highlight the entire column. And then for what they call criteria 1, we're just going to highlight the single cell over here referring to item. Now we want another condition, another criteria, and for that we want week. So again, I go to the sheet, highlight the entire week number column, and I don't plan to put any data beneath the data I'm highlighting. So then a comma and refer to week number. And there we go. Just like before, I'm going to copy it down a little bit farther and then do an if statement. And simply put, what I want to say here is if the number in column A or B, we just pick one, let's say B equals 0, then I want to return a blank. If not, I want to return the sum if formula. For copying that down, you see that it stops at the end. And to make this easier to read, you can go ahead and hold down Alt and hit Enter to space this out. If this helps nesting formulas at all, do it. It's a fairly common practice, actually. At this point, if you want to stop, you can do some beginner's analysis, like who's the top salesperson, what's the best selling product, real basic things. Or maybe practice some pivot tables. I'm going to use the mouse for pivot tables in case you're unfamiliar. If you go to Insert, Pivot Table, highlight the data you want to put in a pivot table, and then it asks you where you want to put it. I just like it in the same sheet. So the sum from table range, highlight the range, put it in the existing worksheet, and the location we have the cursor. So I put the cursor where I want the pivot table to be before I hit insert. And I do have 2 pivot table obstacle courses as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put rep in the rows. Sales total in the values, and it gives me the totals for each sales rep. So I can see the top salesperson is. Let's say I wanted to know sales by item number. I can get that by putting item in the rows. Maybe I want item and rep. And I like to have these in a certain format, and I'll show you how that looks. If I click on the pivot table, I get these 2 tabs here: Pivot Table Analyze and Design. If you go to Design, I like to eliminate the subtotals. Report layout, I like to show it in tabular form, and I like it repeated labels. So I think that looks a lot better. I think it just looks neater. And if we wanted to put week, we can put that across the top. Let's say you want to add a chart. If you've selected the pivot table and go to Insert Pivot Chart, you can make a bar chart. And you can see each of the items, how they sold in each of the weeks. One thing to keep in mind is that if you refresh using F9, your pivot table is going to lag behind it. So before we start analyzing, we probably want to do a copy and paste special value of the sales data. Again, using the mouse, which is not my preference, but I think if I've got any beginners out there, it might benefit them. So again, we have to go to right click and then R for refresh to our pivot table, again because it's going to lag behind. Anytime you change the underlying data, it's not going to automatically change the pivot table. You have to refresh the pivot table. Let's go ahead and make another tab called Manufacturing. So we have the demand, but what do our machines look like? Let's say we have 3 machines, line 1, 2, and 3. Maybe they're not machines, but processes that require people and machines to complete. In this spreadsheet, we're going to make this daily. Today's date, equal sign, refer to that, add 1. Extend that down about 14 days. I think our planning can only really benefit if we do it out a couple weeks. And we'll go ahead and also put the week associated with the date. For that, we'll put equals week num. Refer to the date. It gives us a funky layout, but if we do Control Shift apostrophe in the top, tilde, in the top left corner, it gives us the normal layout. So what item do we want to manufacture and in what quantities? So like we did for pricing, let's put another sheet out here for machine capacity. So we got our machines. Now we have our daily capacity. And for these we can invent numbers, and that's a variable you can play with just for different analyses. Maybe line 1 is 300 per day, line 2 600, line 3 450 per day. Whatever units we're making, widgets or whatever. So back to manufacturing. What I think I want to do is do a lookup here. Before I do that, I'm going to create a pivot table of the demand. That way I can put it next to my manufacturing analysis so I can be reminded how much of each item is in demand on what week. I don't want count, I want sum, so I click on that in the values field. And I'm going to use the shortcuts here to get it in tabular form, repeated, and eliminate subtotals. So that's JYPR, JYPT, JYTD. And then I'll filter out the 0 week. So we don't want that. So I'm copying this entire pivot table, pasting it over here. So I can reference it. Move this down 1 so I can have my lookup. Again, because I want to be reminded of the capacities. So I'm going to do a VLOOKUP, look up the line, refer to my daily capacity sheet, lock those in so that doesn't move when we drag it. I want the second column false. We can paste it over here. And there we go. That way if I change something in the daily capacity sheet, it translates over to the manufacturing because it's a lookup. So like I said, this might be anticlimactic. I'm not going to go ahead and solve this problem. And there actually isn't just one sole solution. There might be conditions like service level agreement, where certain customers get preferential treatment and need their products in 1 week rather than other customers who pay less and can get it in 4 weeks. So to solve this problem, I would do a setup through an add-in called Solver that could optimize it for us. But that's going to be a different video. So all of you can propose a solution or even come to me with questions, and then we could do another video if there's enough clamor in the comments for me to do one. So let's go ahead and ask some questions about this data and put it on another tab. First, some beginner questions. For example, who was the top salesperson? Real easy for advanced folks, but for beginners, this is right up your alley. Maybe what was the best selling item? Basic questions you can come up with. So if you're at beginner level, again, that should be perfect. But if you want to get more technically complicated, you can ask a question like, what is your recommendation for an ideal production schedule for the next 3 weeks? There you go, you've got your practice data. If you guys want to work on the problem and tell me what you come up with, great. If you have any questions, post in the comments. Thanks again, until next time.